Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Paiz Bekker. I'm the Regional Director of American Friends Service Committee in Latin America. And so thank you very much for joining us. The idea of these few minutes is to share with you what is going on regarding the emergency caused by two tropical storms. And these two huge hurricanes, category 5, and they hit a category 4 with 15 days in between. So I really would like to share with you, the impact of these two tropical storms. First of all, and yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know if you heard my presentation at the beginning, so I can do that again. My name is, just in case, if someone didn't hear from the very beginning, my name is Paiz Bekker, and I am the Regional Director of AFSC for Latin America. And in this opportunity, we would like to share with you the effects, of these huge tropical storms that affected many countries of Central America. I'm going to concentrate in Guatemala. Guatemala is the northern east areas of Guatemala where we are working, and to share with you, first of all, to give you, like a general picture of the devastation and the effects, the impact of ETA and IOTA. As I was saying before, these two tropical storms hit almost the same areas, with only 2 weeks in between, so the devastation has been, increased dramatically, because the first, IOTA arrived, and then 2 weeks after, ETA arrived, and then 2 weeks after IOTA, so the devastation has been really a very important. Many people is talking about that these two tropical storms are the worst in decades, in the case of Honduras, Nicaragua, and Guatemala. So the clear effects, just to give you an idea, of the effects of ETA and IOTA together, is more than 2 million people which have been affected by that. More than 32,000 people are right now living in temporary shelters. More than 200,000 people are living in non-official temporary shelters, I would say. And well, in terms of houses, more than 70,000 houses have been affected. Infrastructure, more than houses has been, like roads have been destroyed. More than 40 bridges were destroyed, and many sections of main roads are still, flooded. And regarding also the agricultural effects, I would say, it's thousands of hectares have been washed away, where, survival plantations, crops like corn, beans, cardamom, among others. The departments more affected in Guatemala are 9, departments or provinces, So we are talking about Huehuetenango, Quiché, Alta Verapaz, Baja Verapaz, El Progreso, Zacapa, Chiquimula, and Izabal. So if you see the map of Guatemala, we are talking about the central and the northeastern regions of Guatemala. Many of the municipalities, for example, in the department of Chiquimula, were affected, where the worst numbers of chronic malnutritions are based, and so basically, we see that the devastation is huge in the country, especially in the region I mentioned before. But to really understand the complexity, of these two storms and the impact, it's very important to see it from this, I would say, socio-environmental perspective. It's not only the storms, and the bad luck, I would say, is, of course, there are many factors involved in this process, and I would like to mention a few of them. The first one is, I would say, the very poor and ineffective response from the government institutions. There were 3 days, before the Iota, the second tropical storm, was arriving, in Guatemala, and almost nothing was done during these 3 days. No, very well organized response and preparation, I would say, for temporary shelters, good advice in all these remote communities, etc. So there was no plan whatsoever to respond to this. Basically, it was like, okay, guys, it's going to be heavy rains for the coming days, basically. So I think we lost 3 precious days, that many people could be saved, I forgot to mention that more than 100 people died, and more than 50 persons are still missing, sorry. So as I say, the other factors that are really important to take into the considerations are, well, that response, that's the first one. The second is the pandemic crisis, with the COVID-19 from 2 perspectives. As you know, many of these communities were taking their own, I would say, measures to deal with the pandemic crisis, and living in the rural areas, they were, well, I would say, protected by that isolation, and they had their own ways to deal with it. But right now, as I said before, it's around 300,000 persons living in temporary shelters. And as you know, if normally it's quite difficult to get, I would say, a very good protocols, biosafety protocols, to reduce to the minimum the community transmission of the COVID-19 virus in these temporary shelters, which are overcrowded, and most of them are not official shelters, people are trying to get some refuge wherever they are able to do so, because many areas were isolated. They were not even able to go to the official temporary shelters because there were no way to go there. And the other perspective, I would say, from the pandemic crisis is that this is being used as an excuse, to really reduce the spaces of civil society. And it is important to mention that, because then in those communities living in those areas already were facing a lot of problems, human rights violations, a lot of tensions, between land, a lot of evictions and things like that. So I think it's very important to mention that, because that is also affecting directly, adding, I would say, complexity to this emergency, I would say. The other factor which is important is to consider the environmental issues, the impact in the environment in that area. For example, the monocultures like the African palm oil, which is produced there. The other one is the extractive industry, like the open sky mining. And I'm talking about these issues because they are impacting, especially, with the basins in those areas, Even, hurricanes like Mitch in the same region, now we see that the levels of water with the same amount of rainfall, it's the regions affected and flooded are, at least 4 times, bigger than, many years ago when the Mitch affected. So apart from that, another very important factor is the malnutrition. Guatemala occupies one of the first places in chronic malnutrition numbers, which is really sad. And it occupies also the 6th place worldwide, you see. So I think it's very important to see this emergency from different perspective. Of course, there are immediate needs, and I'm going to talk now about the things we are doing, as AFSC, and where we are working right now. But also, it's important to see that the effects at the midterm and the long-term processes, because the impact of this is going to be huge. And we will speak about this, the effect of these two storms for many years. That's the way we see, not only us, but many of the organizations working in the region. We are really speaking up and saying, well, look, this is something it will need, an international approach. Anyway, for this very first phase, we as an AFSC, we are working in one of these departments, which is Alta Verapaz. We've been trying to focus our intervention in some of the most remote communities, I would say. So far, we've been attending 11 communities, and we are trying to expand, to other departments like Izabal, Baja Verapaz. We are already working in another department, which is Quiché, with the Ixil peoples, with some of the organizations working with youth in Quiché, in the Ixil area. And the idea, in the very quick response has been, of course, food, clean water, and biosafety kits and hygiene kits. Those are the main needs. People right after this, this first storm and the second storm, have been starving. For days. They were just isolated with no way to go because there was water everywhere. Many areas were underwater. So it took days, for some of the rescue teams to arrive. And as I am speaking, we've been the first organizations who were able to reach, for example, one of the communities called San Pascual. And just a few days ago, you had to cross 5 sections of the road to go there by car and by boat. So you have to, leave the car there and then to take a boat and then, take another car and so on and so forth. The only way so far has been through air. And yeah, today we were the first organization who were able to arrive in San Pascual, and as I said before, with these supplies, as I mentioned before. This is our first approach in these 11 communities. As I said before, our idea is to really expand our interventions. We are doing that in close coordination with local partners, those who live there and who knows very well the communities, like the Comité de Unidad Campesina, CUC, And also we are providing this kind of support to the main shelters, some of the official shelters, in some of the areas where we see that people are arriving, and then these official shelters have been working. So that's our main approach so far. As I said before, the idea is to combine, we are learning from these communities to really understand what is going on, not only from this perspective of the, immediate humanitarian response, but also see that we need to see them as a human beings. Right after this rapid response, they will need seeds, they will need land, they will need ways, to go back and to, to produce for their own families, And I think this is essential to think about it because this is the second phase where people will need, a lot of support as much as the immediate response, I would say, So to think about this rehabilitation phase is essential. And also to start thinking about how is it that they are going to be supported, to have the means, to go back, and to support their families. Yeah, I will leave it there. That's the things we are doing right now. I haven't been able to see the comments, if there are maybe some questions. Okay, I don't see any so far, but anyway, it's our idea. I really would like to share with you that the main idea of our interventions is not only to do the immediate or just a humanitarian response, as I said before. I think it's extremely important to concentrate also in these 3 phases. And not only see these people as victims, but to understand the context they've been dealing with, and from there to see what these regions are going to need from now on. Yeah, I have a question here. What people can help us? And of course, we have our web page, and we are getting, more than 500 people have been, or so far has been able to donate, to us. And we be taking all these resources. That's why we were able to be the first ones right now after the Iota tropical storm, the second, tropical storm, to reach these communities and to expand our interventions, as I said before, in other communities, which nobody has reached them so far. And I should add also that the government response is not there, after many weeks. It is true that it's been very difficult to have access to the remote areas, but I mean, it is possible to go to Coban, which is one of the main cities, in Alta Verapaz, and from there to reach other regions of the northeast part of the country, And it is so sad to see that nobody is doing almost anything. I'm talking about the government right now, not of the institutions that are responsible to do so. So it seems that yesterday it was the first team arriving, in the region. So what people can do is to support us in, if we are able to, to donate, to expand the news, to really speak about it, what is going on, because even the mass media, they are not there. We've seen that it's only few, mass media. Most of them are alternative, media that are trying to cover, the impact and the dimension, of this emergency, So that's why I think it's very important. And there's another question. Yeah, how we tied this, humanitarian response to our programs, and to see it from a long-term perspective. I think it's part of our added value. As I said before, it's not just to provide with humanitarian response, and that's it. But when we see people as a human beings, with the context that it doesn't end after they get, basic supplies like food, etc. But they are living in very important, I would say, in crisis already. There is a huge crisis regarding land tenants, for example. Many of them have been evicted. Many of them have been evicted by armed groups, for example. Many of them are land defenders also, as I said before, which have been affected by these calamity states where groups of power are using these processes to really this kind of a limbo, I would say, to and this reduction of civil society spaces to evict them, and there are no news, there are no mass media, nobody is talking about that. So what we're trying to do is to link our programs. To give you a very good example of this is that we know that in these regions, if we don't do something to the midterm and to long-term processes, to reactivate economies that works for people, but also for nature, to involve women in these processes, we know that very soon we will see a massive exodus of people trying to reach, northern countries, like Mexico and US, and this is a reality. We've seen that before. So I think that we have this window of opportunity to really, concentrate our efforts and to work in unity, with many different sectors. This is a time to work together, really, and I think we are already a bit late, and I think we are a good source of information as we are in the field, talking with a lot of local counterparts. So we are ready also to work with other sectors, and of course, the idea is how to connect our programs, regarding the migration. We've been working in migration for many years in the region, and how to see the root causes of migration, and how to address, a dignity life for these people, so they don't need to leave their communities, because they've been there struggling but surviving, trying to have a, to really create spaces of well-being, for these communities now affected by this tropical storm. We are talking about millions, so it is a huge impact. So it is essential to see this link about, this rehabilitation phase, but also this long-term phase. We are working with young people also, and how to deal with violence and how to connect these processes in this long term is essential. How are we going to produce this advocacy, from these communities which have been affected with these evictions? How are they going to, to have their voices listened? That is something that we can do, together with other organizations. But this is the added value we see of AFSC, because we've been doing that, for many years, and now we can combine this process, to see the strong link between this humanitarian response, and to link into these long-term projects that we are performing in this country, Yes. Yeah. Well, I think we are already, the time is almost over, I think, so thank you. I really would like to thank you, for your presence, for joining us, in this process. We really would like to really emphasize that these crises now are not in the mass media, and it is essential to call for the concern, and the need we really have right now, for this to see it not only as a, as a humanitarian crisis, but it's going to impact, the whole national context, right now in Guatemala, where there's a political crisis, so I really hope that you will join me, not only to support us, with your donations, but also, of course, to spread the news, and to please talk about the impact of this, the huge impact that this crisis could have if we don't act as soon as possible. So thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for joining us.